have folks here, and we'd like to go ahead and turn things over to Sharon and Connor to get us going tonight. Please take it away.
Okay, great. So I want to welcome everyone to the 2024 House Congressional Forum on Developmental Disability Issues. We are happy to have candidates running for our House District 7th, 8th, 10th, and 11th. We want to thank the ARC of Northern Virginia, the Autism Society of Northern Virginia, Disability Resource Center, Moms in Motion.
Recording in progress.
I think someone may be joined from multiple places in one location.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah, I switched over. I switched over to my computer.
Okay, so continue. Independent Center of Northern Virginia, Virginia Autism Project, Did Lake, Autism Society of Tidewater, Autism Society of Central Virginia, Spark, Rev Up Virginia, and the ARC of Loudoun. We have special thanks to CRI for supplying the interpreters and additional sponsorship provided by the ARC of Greater Prince William. We also want to thank each and every one of you watching live now or watching it taped at a later date. Now, I am proud to introduce my son, Connor, who will say a few words on the logistics, and then the amazing Lucy Bell, who is our moderator for the 90 minutes.
Hello, my name is Connor Cummings. I am a self-advocate and proud to be autistic. Please remember that this is a sensory-friendly forum. This is not a debate. Talk about what you can and have done for individuals and families with disabilities. Share your disability experiences and plans if elected. Please concentrate only on you. Let the other candidates concentrate on themselves while you talk all about you. No speaking at the same time or interrupting each other, and no raised voices. Thank you for respecting the sensory-friendly instructions. This is your opportunity to answer our questions and to hear our stories, not just today, but every day you are in office. To all of you who are watching, these candidates are here because they care. Thank you for being here to respectfully listen to all candidates. This is our opportunity to hear a disability platform to help ensure that our representatives include us in the decision-making, not just mentioned, but a seat at the table. November 5th or prior, you can vote for the candidates that you feel are best for your needs and supports. Remember to always vote because our voice matters. Now, here is Lucy to start the questions.
Thank you so much, Connor. You did a beautiful job kicking us off there. I just wanted to give some final reminders that we'll hear from candidates that cover Northern Virginia very broadly, and we'll give each candidate at first about 2 minutes to introduce themselves. We'll cue the first candidate speaking on behalf of a district to remind us of the geography of that district, since in Northern Virginia, living on one side of the street can sometimes change your district, right? So we'll talk through those kinds of things. Then in their introduction, we'll ask candidates to say their name, the area where they're running, and talk a little bit about themselves. It would be great to hear from candidates in terms of history working on disability policy issues or any personal involvement in the disability community. We'll go through the order listed here on your screen, and then we'll rotate. So with each subsequent question, a different candidate will have a chance to go first and last, making sure no one's unfairly in the hot seat the entire time. We'll give candidates rotating chances to answer every single question that we've got time for here tonight, and we'll ask candidates to keep their answers to about 2 minutes. As Connor emphasized, our forum's nonpartisan. So we're going to first start with the 7th District, and Eugene Vinman, you're up first. If you could introduce yourself, starting with a little bit of a description of the district.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, ARC, Sharon, especially Connor. Did a magnificent job. So appreciate the intro and the ground rules. I'm in the 7th Congressional District. It is down the 95 corridor from Occoquan, so south of Fairfax County, eastern side of Prince William, down to Stafford, Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, and then the Potomac, King George, and Caroline, and the Piedmont, Culpeper, Orange, Greene, Madison, and we have a tiny sliver of Albemarle. So it's a really diverse district. There's ex-urban, suburban, and rural parts, and I'm proud to have visited every part of the district, all 3,100 square miles. Um, and I guess, should I just go into the opening statement now?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Eugene Vimman. I'm a husband, a dad, an Iraq War Army veteran running for Congress to fight for middle-class values, for middle-class Virginia families. And my family came to this country as refugees from the Soviet Union when I was just 4 years old, with less than $800 between us. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and we had faith in the American dream. After many lean years, we were able to build a life for ourselves, and as a family, we thrived. That's why when I was old enough, I joined the Army to repay the debt my family owed to this great country. I spent 25 years serving our country in uniform, first as an airborne infantry officer in the 82nd Airborne, leading troops and jumping out of airplanes. Then as a law of war advisor in Iraq after law school, I advised the theater headquarters and senior commander on the most sensitive operations. Then as a military prosecutor, where I fought to protect servicewomen from sexual predators, took on drug cases, and held the powerful to account. I later served as a deputy legal advisor, as a detail lieutenant colonel in the Army and the White House National Security Council. In the Army, the only thing that mattered was the mission. My wife of 26 years, Cindy, and I have been blessed to raise our family in Woodbridge. We send our kids to local public schools. We spent our free times cleaning up the Neabsco wetlands and hiking the Prince William Forest. But like many families, it hasn't always been easy. Now I'm on a new mission to serve the community I'm raising my family in, to lower costs, to protect our fundamental rights, and make sure that every family, no matter what life throws their way, can live in dignity and live their American dream. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. And now, Derrick Anderson, you're up. If you could remind us where you're running and share your opening statement.
Hey, good evening. Sharon and Connor, thank you again for hosting this. This is absolutely amazing. You guys are amazing. And I've enjoyed our time talking, even if it was briefly. So I'm running in the 7th Congressional District, as Eugene said, is the eastern side of Prince William, down through Stafford, into Spotsylvania, the city of Fredericksburg, King George, Caroline, Orange, Culpeper, Madison, Green, and as we call it, the slither of the 7th, Albemarle. So I grew up in Spotsylvania County. That's where I started or went to school. I went K through 12 in Spotsylvania County. I graduated from Cortland High School in Spotsylvania County. I wrestled in high school, so that's why quite often I know a lot of the high schools from the area from wrestling. And then I also worked at my mom's restaurant. So my mom owned a few restaurants in Spotsylvania County. I did anything from mop floors, sweep floors, do dishes, and eventually mom promoted me to cook. So I was the guy in the back cooking, flipping hamburgers quite often. So I went to Virginia Tech on an ROTC scholarship. Go Hokies. They got a win this weekend, which we're excited about, before I joined the Army. And I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. So I joined the Army. I started off as an infantry officer, went to Ranger School, and then deployed for 15 months as part of the surge in Iraq. After that, I went to the Honor Guard, where I did about 150 funerals in Arlington National Cemetery. I got to do the Best Ranger competition. I got to do a lot of amazing things in Arlington at the cemetery. And it was one of the one of my favorite duty assignments, to be able to do the funerals and the ceremonies there in Arlington. I ended up becoming a Green Beret. I led 2 special forces teams over the course of 5 deployments, including Afghanistan, Bahrain, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. After I got out of the military, I went to law school at Georgetown Law and clerked for 2 federal judges. So my priorities are pretty simple. I want to make sure it's more affordable for people to live. I want to make sure our communities are safe, and I want to make sure we take care of our veterans. So I look forward to our discussion tonight, and thank you again for having me.
We're glad to have you here. Someone who was born and raised in King George County. I'm excited to see they've got some awesome options for representation coming up. Thanks, Eugene and Derrick. And now on to Representative Byer to start off with the awesome 8th.
Lucy, thank you very much. So I represent the 8th, where my grandchildren are 5th generation Northern Virginians. The 8th is inside the Beltway, with a little sliver along the river down to Mount Vernon, in order to catch up. I'd really like to just talk about my connection and longtime commitment to disability issues. Lucy, as you know well, my next sister, a year younger than I, was born with an intellectual disability, Kathy Byer. And so she was always the centerpiece of our family and her personality. As a consequence, we've all been deeply involved in issues with those with intellectual disabilities. My mother was president of the ARC of Northern Virginia. Kathy was president of People First. I've been involved in things like Melwood and others for a long, long time. In 1977, as a very young man, I was on the board of the Child Development Center in Falls Church dealing with children born with cerebral palsy. In 1980, when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce in Falls Church, I spent a day in a wheelchair as part of Disability Awareness Day. That then led me to be on the founding board of the Independence Center in Arlington 44 years ago. During the 80s, I served on the Epilepsy Foundation board. And then as lieutenant governor from 98 to 98, one of the first pieces of legislation I got passed was the creation of the Virginia Commission on Individuals with Disabilities. I chaired it for 8 years. It's been a tradition. Every lieutenant governor has chaired it since. I coming to Congress, I inherited and have been the lead sponsor for 10 years of Keep All Students Safe Act, the number one priority of the American Autism Society, national standards for disability and restraint of kids, usually kids with disabilities, usually kids of color, usually little boys. I co-chair the Mental Health Caucus. I founded the Suicide Prevention Caucus. I've tried to spend so much of my public service making a difference for those not born with all the privileges that so many of us are born with. And I think growing up with my sister Kathy, my oldest child has schizophrenia, and every family's been touched in some way by disabilities. And I hope my public service is a response to that. And with that, I yield back, Lucy.
Thanks so much for joining us. And now we'll turn the microphone over to Jerry Torres, also for the 8th.
Thank you so much. So Don explained what the 8th was, so I won't go into that. My name is Jerry Torres. I retired from the United States Army Special Force after nearly 30 years of service. Enlisting when I was a teenager, retiring at the rank of Master Sergeant. During my military career, I served in combat, counter-drug, counterterrorism, peacekeeping, foreign internal defense, and anti-human trafficking missions in the United States and around the world, including the southern border of Mexico. When I retired from my last active duty assignment, I created a company that made nearly $1 billion right here in Northern Virginia. And we supported U.S. Programs, primarily U.S. programs around the world in 40 countries. But let me get to why I think that this discussion is important. So when I was a kid, my mother cared for disabled children. And there was actually 5 of them that were in our house all the time because their families could not find that kind of support within the neighborhoods. So I grew up living with folks that became my brothers, and 4 brothers and 1 sister. And I've stayed in contact with them most of my life. Because of my mother's leadership and because of the work she did with disability, children with disabilities, I actually got a degree in psychology. And my intent was to be a psychologist or a sociologist. Well, I opted to stay in the military and did not pursue those careers. But throughout my adult life, I've continued to create programs that helped people that were at risk or vulnerable from some kind of thing. And it includes disabilities, but it also includes social types of things as well. So for example, I created a program for an indigenous tribe in northern Colombia, and the name of the tribe was the Arhuacos. And basically they had a very high infant mortality rate, a very, very high one. And the reason is they were moved from the beautiful valleys where they originated and up to the peaks of the Andes Mountains because of the drug wars. There was, the army and the national police were fighting the drug folks in the valley. So they moved up to territory where you can't raise a lot of crops or raise a lot of good livestock. So they had a high infant mortality rate as a result of that. So for over about a 3-year period, I started, led, initiated, and funded a program to reverse their infant mortality rate. And we were just hugely successful. At the end of 3 years, we did, in fact, reverse it. Recently, I helped build with 3 other donors. I was the largest donor of the 3, a 5-faith hospital in the country of Sierra Leone, which is in West Africa. And the reason I did this was to help children, typically young girls, ages 8 through 18. And I say 8 through 18 because that was the youngest person that we had actually rescued that was part of the human trafficking. that goes on in West Africa. The same stuff happens in Latin America, by the way, and I can talk about programs I did with that. But we built that 5 phase hospital to reintegrate them into society once they were rescued. It's about a 500-bed hospital. The 5 phases do 5 different things to make sure that they can get integrated, from education to developing social skills to recovering from the trauma they go through for being trafficked. I built a wildlife refuge. Actually, I'm on my second one now, and one is 135 acres, the other one's 40 acres, but it's for kids to go out and see nature in its pristine condition. In one case, we just had the basic kind of wildlife there, the deer and the turkeys and the pheasants and that sort of thing. But we were, about a month ago, we found that we had bobcats living on the property, which is the first seen in decades. So, and that's for the kids to be able to get out there and experience the pristine nature that, we hope to leave them, when we leave. In terms of, just specific to Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, when I owned my company, I sold it about 2019. Every year we had Kids Day. I was the CEO, president CEO for about 10 years. And the Kids Day was, we got kids from the community and we took them to locations where we rented balloons, the hot air balloons, and we let the kids ride about 50 feet in the air if it was nice weather. We did that every year for about 10 years. We also bought school supplies for the kids within the school systems here in Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax every year. And typically that was end of August, beginning of September timeframe. So we did that every year. Every year we had Christmas, where we go out and buy gifts for about 100 families, so that the kids could enjoy Christmas. And we did that. We did Thanksgiving turkeys, 100 turkeys for about 5 years until I retired from my firm. So, my adult life has been giving back to the community. I was blessed to have been fortunate enough to have a successful company, and that successful company allows me to be able to do these kinds of things. And there are so many more things that we do on a daily basis. My daughter is involved within the community in a lot of volunteer work. So for example, she's teaching diet to people at risk of cancer and those kinds of things. So with that, I think I'll just go ahead and turn it over to the next speaker.
Thanks for being with us here tonight. And then David Kennedy, you are up to share a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Lucy. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Kennedy. I am one of the independent candidates running for the U.S. Congress. Really appreciate the Autism Society and the ARC of Northern Virginia for hosting this event. And Connor, you're awesome. Thanks for getting us kicked off tonight. Before I forget, because I always forget, you can learn more about me at www.davekennedy2024.com. Didn't forget this time. A bit on my background. I live in Arlington. I have 3 grown children and a proud grandpa of 1. I'm a longtime member of a church ministry that's committed to folks that are unhoused and living on the margins of society. My wife, Barbara, and I are dedicated to a small rural village in Zambia where we've done education and missionary work since 2015. My 35-year professional career has been as an advocate for higher education and university research, which includes a lot of interactions with the National Institutes of Health. I recently graduated from seminary, the Wesley Theological Seminary, and this next chapter of my life, diving into this, is all about fighting for justice and lifting folks who are marginalized or disenfranchised. I started collecting signatures for this job on January 2nd. And since then, I've met thousands and thousands of people. And in those conversations with folks, I think I've become a much, much better candidate. Like all of us, I have people in my life who are struggling and sometimes really hurting. In Congress, I want to tackle issues such as the high cost of housing and childcare, a living wage and the dignity of a job. In the context of tonight, that's talking to home health care workers who are key to this whole landscape. I also want to tackle issues such as mental illness and addiction, which is it's real, it's on the streets, and it's it's devastating to the people who are suffering through it and their families. I want to tackle caring for veterans. My son is a veteran of the Iraq War, and like those of you on this call who've shared your experiences in the military, thank you. And I know that's you come back with really hard lessons, and it's not always easy to come back to and acclimate to civilian life. I'm a huge advocate for a compassionate safety net and those who are the most vulnerable. And in the context of tonight, advancing medical research and the rights of those affected by childhood disabilities. I love it when your advocacy with at ARC and autism is not about charity; it's about rights, and I think that's powerful. And I'm a huge supporter of what you all are fighting for. These are issues I've cared about, and I'll continue to care about and fight for in the United States Congress. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for being with us tonight. And then wrapping up the 8th District, Bentley Hensel, please join us.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to Sharon, Connor, and the ARC for inviting me tonight. I'm excited to be here and discuss these important issues. My name is Bentley Hensel. I'm running as an independent in Virginia's 8th Congressional District. I'm a data-driven problem solver with a deep commitment to privacy and transparency. My campaign is about bringing real solutions, not just talk. In my day job, I'm a senior data and DevOps engineer at Civic Actions, where I work on major government sites like Medicare.gov, VA.gov, and NSF.gov. And I've had the privilege of working with some of the best digital accessibility experts across the US, Canada, and Europe to ensure that everyone, regardless of their abilities, can access government resources. One project I'm particularly proud of is GovAlly A11Y, a tool that my team and I built to scan every single URL across .mil and .gov to test accessibility and ensure that they actually are meeting the current legal requirements. After years of working in tech and public service, I've seen firsthand how outdated government systems hold us back. I'm focusing on changing that by bringing modern, effective solutions to the table. One way that I'm leading by example, even before election, is through transparency. I'm the first federal candidate ever to instantly disclose all of my campaign donations. It's a small step, but an important one towards making more government more transparent and accountable. I have and live with multiple cognitive disabilities that impact every single aspect of my daily life. However, over the years, I've learned to turn those challenges into strengths, and they shape how I approach problem solving, always focusing on finding real effective solutions and not just identifying problems. Thank you again for this opportunity. I'm excited to be here and talk about this important issue.
Thanks for joining us. We're glad to have you. And now we'll bring up Senator Suhas Subramanian. Please, your opening statement.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you to everyone at the ARC who helped make this happen. Thank you, Sharon and Connor, for your advocacy. I'm Senator Suhas Subramanian, running for Congress in Virginia's 10th Congressional District. And so if you live in Loudoun County, Fauquier County, or Rappahannock County, you're in the district. If you live in a small slice of Western Fairfax, like in Clifton area, or you live in Western Prince William, like Haymarket or Manassas, you're also in the 10th Congressional District. I know it's confusing. Some people in McLean still think they're in the 10th District, but we did have redistricting in 2022, and so it's a new district. But I'm proud to be running here. Loudoun County is where my parents came when they came from India in the late 70s. Dulles Airport was kind of their Ellis Island, and growing up, I was taught the value of service and giving back. And over the years, I've served in various capacities. I served in the Obama White House as a technology advisor, and I served locally on various councils and as a volunteer EMT firefighter. And I'm running for Congress basically because I want to make sure that we can take on tough fights and deliver real results for communities like ours. And I think of my two daughters; they're 2 and 4, and I look at not just the next 2 years, but the next 20 years, and what our country's going to look like. And the disabilities community and even the ARC specifically, I've always tried to be a champion, and I try to make sure my door was open when anyone brought issues to me. And even this past session as a state senator, The couple issues people brought up were one, access to the ballot for people with certain disabilities. And so we actually expanded with the help of the ARC. I brought a bill to expand curbside voting to more people with disabilities. And we were able to pass that bill in a bipartisan way and get that signed into law. And then with the help of Senator Barbara Favola introduced a bill that I worked with her on supporting to basically, it was basically a special education omnibus to help teachers, essentially teachers who aren't necessarily special education teachers, but who are teachers who are trying to get people who are into more non-special education classes, people with disabilities, to get them in and get them trained. And they did a lot of other things, but that was put together by many of the folks who are on this call tonight. And so thank you all. Just know that the best legislation comes from people who reach out to us, people who are our constituents. And I want to continue to listen and work together with you all when I'm in Congress. But thank you so much for joining this forum. I look forward to answering the questions and also learning more about some of the issues that you all need addressed. And I look forward to being your champion in Congress, just like I was in the General Assembly. Thank you.
We're glad to have you with us. And now also campaigning in the 10th, Mike Clancy, please join us. Oh, you're still on mute. Zoom hazards.
Yes. I had to wait a long time to get a chance to speak. So, and we still have 2 more from the 11th, right? Still to go. So I'm Mike Clancy. I'm the Republican nominee for Congress in the 10th Congressional District, and I live in Loudoun County. And my mission in running for Congress is to restore America. After the past 4 years, it's time to move this country in a new and better direction. And that's my mission, to take us forward, to take us in a new direction, and to restore America. I'm a business leader, senior vice president with a global technology company. I served on Governor Youngkin's technology and cybersecurity team, and I'm honored to be endorsed by Governor Youngkin. I'm a husband and dad. My wife, Lynn, and I are the proud parents of 4 sons. I've spent many years as a baseball and basketball coach and heavily involved in PT activities and advocating for job training programs for young adults with Down syndrome. And I've been at the school board, fighting for our children and fighting for parents. And that includes the battle to open the schools in 2021 and 2022. I was at those Loudoun school board meetings and met with many parents who have children with autism and other learning disabilities, including children who needed speech therapy and occupational therapy. And these children were disproportionately harmed by the school closures. They were frustrated. Private schools were open, but the public schools stayed closed. And it took Governor Youngkin to get those schools to open. And then we had the school board mask mandate issue. Again, I was at the school board advocating to make those masks optional. Masks were harmful to the children, especially for children needing speech therapy, who needed occupational therapy, who had substantial anxiety from those masks mandates, and especially with very special sensory sensitivity issues. And the masks were really inhibited their ability to go to school and to participate in a classroom. And unfortunately, this issue became quite political. It split down party lines, with Republicans supporting the opening of schools and making masks optional so that parents could make the best decision for their child and for their educational needs. And then, unfortunately, the Democrats, like my opponent, voted against opening schools and voted against making masks optional. I mean, ultimately, because Republicans had control of the House of Delegates, we were able to pass the bill that opened schools and made the masks optional. And one courageous Democrat, Senator Chap Peterson, broke ranks with his party and voted with Republicans to pass that very critically important legislation. And at that moment, that allowed schools to move forward and provided the opened back up the educational opportunities for children with autism and children with disabilities and children that needed speech therapy and occupational therapy. Now, those children are still struggling because of the lengthy closing of the schools. It'll take a while for them to catch up with all the lost time they had because online education simply did not work for children with disabilities. And in Congress, I'll continue to be a strong advocate for our children and for parents' rights as the ultimate decision maker for the education and care of your children, to advocate for children with disabilities and to make sure parents and families have resources that they need. And finally, let me emphasize that I'm going to Congress to serve you, to work for you, to fight for our children, to fight for your future, to fight to restore America. I'm Mike Clancy, running for Congress in Virginia's 10th Congressional District, and I'd be honored to have your vote. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Thanks for joining us. And now we'll be joined by Representative Jerry Connolly. Jerry, we're happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Lucy, and thank you, Sharon and Connor. I don't really have to particularly introduce myself. I represent Fairfax County outside the Beltway now, but I previously also represented Prince William County. I had 30 years of interaction with the disability community, first on the Board of Supervisors here in Fairfax, working with the Community Service Board and nonprofits. Then when I got to Congress, I worked with ARC of Northern Virginia, including walks, when Trump was president and cut the budget for services to the disabled population. I did a tour of both Prince William and Fairfax to highlight what those cuts would mean for people in desperate need. I went to residential homes run by nonprofit partners, where we had severely physically, developmentally disabled individuals who nonetheless had enormous human spirit, but they couldn't possibly thrive with those cuts if they went into place. And so I think it's really important tonight that as we talk about who we are and what we have done or propose to do, that we also address the funding needs, the resources. Are we willing to buck political leadership of our own parties, if necessarily, to make sure that the population in need we're talking about tonight has what it needs to thrive and to be empowered? In Congress, I was proud to vote for the American Rescue Plan, which provided lots of the resources we're going to be talking about tonight during the pandemic. But unfortunately, once the pandemic ended, a lot of those resources expired, including things like the child tax credit, which cut poverty in America, including among the disabled populations, in half. We need to revisit a lot of the provisions we provided there that made a difference in the quality of lives, kept people thriving and whole. We need to make those permanent. We know they work, but we need to make them permanent. And finally, let me just say, I have a niece who is intellectually disabled, and she went to school here in Fairfax County. She got a job here in Fairfax County. And I saw her at all of the stages of her life, from birth to now an adult woman. And I saw her struggle in school. And I had to experience what she went through, and in the maze of requirements and restrictions, and to try to get to a place where she was empowered and she was integrated like everybody else. And the same in the workplace. Employment ultimately for the adult disabled population is empowerment. It is dignity. And so making sure that we have employment opportunities that pay fair, prevailing wages is really important. It's important to me, but it's more important to the community we're celebrating and talking to tonight. So I hope we can have a substantive discussion, not a political discussion, about what are the needs and how do we each propose to try to meet them. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being with us. And closing out our openings tonight would be Mike Van Meter. Mike, we're happy to have you with us.
Oh, last but not least, I guess. Thank you. Thank you, Lucy and Sharon, and especially you, Connor, for having us here tonight. I really enjoy the opportunity to talk about this discussion, because it's something that, if you know my background, is something I've devoted the last quarter of my life to, and that's helping people with mental health addiction issues in particular, and then the people that are differently abled. I won't say disabled, differently abled human beings that I work with now. Just a little bit about my background. Oh, by the way, and Jerry did mention the dimensions of our district, so I won't go through that again. It's basically suburbs of DC, most of Fairfax, and all of Fairfax City. So my background, I started out life, I went to the University of Florida and went into the Navy. I was a helicopter pilot for 8 years, Persian Gulf. That was the first first time over there. Veteran of that. When I left the Navy, I became a police officer here in Washington, D.C., Metropolitan Police Department. Did that for several years. Also worked some corrections in there. And then I spent just under 21 years as an FBI agent, retired in 2019, and then went back to school, got a second master's degree, which is in addictions and co-occurring disorders. So that's the field that I work in now. How I ended up in that field actually is I'm a person in long-term recovery myself. So it's something that I've experienced personally. It's something that I live, and it's something I've always been open about. And at the end of my FBI career, last 7 years, I taught at the FBI Academy, both new agents and analysts. But I also taught what's known as at what's known as the National Academy, which is teaching leadership courses to police executives. And based on my background in recovery, I was doing a lot of peer work with other FBI employees, and I was asked to develop a course called Leading at Risk Employees. I taught a bunch of things, but that was a course I was asked to specifically design and teach. And the purpose of that course was teaching on PTSD, suicide, family violence, and addiction. So I taught that to police executives when I retired. So I became known for that. Then when I retired, I thought my life in that world was over, but decided to go back during COVID, get another degree from the Hazel and Betty Ford Graduate School for Addiction Studies, and became a therapist. And that's what I do now. I did my internships and residency at a treatment center, and then was hired by a major hospital here in Northern Virginia, where I work in a detox unit. So I see people that have severe issues with PTSD, trauma, victims of human trafficking, all sorts of addictions, both the process addictions, chemical addictions, and then everything in the spectrum that you can think of. I'm on the front line of that every single day. So I see the needs in hospitals and in treatment, and the flaws in our medical insurance system, our flaws in our hospital system, recruiting. And that's something that's near and dear to me, is recruitment and bringing people into the field, because people like myself that are working the field woefully understaffed. And we need to have encouragements and incentives to have people work not only in hospitals and treatment centers, but workers for people that are elderly, people that need assisted living, workers that are helping for those that can't help themselves or that need care. We need tax incentives for that. We need special considerations, and we need to really work on employment for those that are differently abled, because just like my opponent, I believe that people have a right and a dignity to employment, and there's so many skills that people from that particular population can add to society, and I want to make sure that they have that opportunity, and we make it as seamless as possible. Lastly, are veterans that are suffering, and I'm on a mission to recruit people like myself that are veterans, whether they are first responders or veterans of our great military, to get them to transition into the field that I'm in now, because people like myself and the veterans that are on this call have devoted their lives to service, and what I'm doing now is a continuation of service, and it's very honorable, it's very fulfilling, and it gives them purpose as well, but continue to help society. So just a little bit about myself. I'm glad to be here, and looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. We're glad to hear from everybody in the opening, and now we'll pivot towards some more substantive questions. As a reminder, the questions are written to be nonpartisan. Any disability-based nonpartisan questions that folks shared in advance or share tonight will be shared with our candidates. So diving in, and as a preview, Derrick Anderson, you're up first, so you know where we're headed with this. First, we're going to talk about Social Security asset limits, and I think a third of the people who wrote in to ask questions tonight had this as their primary concern. The Supplemental Security Income Program, SSI, provides critical support for millions of people with disabilities to be able to pay for basics like food and rent. It's got a lot of rules that keep people from saving money and moving themselves out of poverty. It also has an asset limit for users that hasn't been updated since 1989. $2,000 per individual, including all assets, and only $3,000 per married couple, who can also totally lose eligibility in some cases. Can you discuss your support or ideas around the bipartisan SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act that would raise these asset limits, or any other ideas you have to address this issue?
Yeah, and Lucy, by the way, I forgot to say thank you as well. But look, yeah, the SSI recipients right now under the current model can only have up to about $2,000 in assets for individuals and 3,000 for couples to remain eligible for benefits. And the act, as it is, raises their outdated limits to 10,000 for individuals and 20,000 for couples to reflect modern cost of living realities. Raising these asset limits would allow SSI beneficiaries to save more money without losing their benefits. And the current rules essentially penalize beneficiaries for their savings, or if their savings exceed low thresholds. So it causes them to lose benefits, and the act eliminates that penalty, helping people to avoid living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, we all feel it right now. The cost of goods with inflation, it's a necessity. Especially when we're seeing in Virginia that about a third of Virginians right now are living paycheck to paycheck. So the main goal is to modernize SSI, give beneficiaries more financial stability while still receiving needed benefits. So this change helps individuals with disabilities or retirees cope with rising living costs without risking the loss of critical financial support due to modest living or modest savings. And I want to note as well, I didn't mention it in my opening, but some of the candidates and or the elected members right now, we talked about our veterans and some of the disabilities. I've worked with a lot of my veteran community, veteran brothers and sisters that have come back from Iraq, Afghanistan, and other places throughout the world to help them cope through these mental health issues, which is another aspect of this as well. Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks so much. And now Representative Byer, your thoughts on the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act or another similar solution?
Well, I strongly support it. I've been waiting some time to be able to co-sponsor it. This is one of those things they call the Noah Ark bills on the Hill, that they wanted to be bipartisan from the very start. So my dear friend Brian Higgins, who sat with me on Ways and Means, a Democrat, and the lead sponsor. And right now there are 35 co-sponsors. So we have to get one more Republican on board so that I can be the Democrat that matches up with it. You know, one elephant from the left, one donkey from the right. But I completely believe in it. It's really, really important for all the reasons that we have understood. I have family members on SSI, and I know how difficult it is. They can't own a car, can't invest in a home. You can't give them too much at Christmas because it breaks the rules. As in parallel, by the way, I'm the lead on the Enable Act, which is parallel to this, which is not just SSI benefits, but all the money that we're allowed to, those with disabilities are allowed to keep. And they were facilitating long-term savings, helping individuals with disabilities build stuff for the future. We're not making this a Noah's Ark bill because I'm hoping that we will take back the House in January and be able to pass many of these things right away. But we have to just keep pushing forward as best we can.
Thanks for joining us. And now, Jerry Torres, the question to you about savings penalty elimination.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. So, you know, it's been 35 years since then this thing has even been looked at seriously. So, I mean, we're talking about, you know, a little bit of lateness here. That's 17 congressional terms that this thing has still been at those levels. So just getting to the answer, because I'm reading a question and the answer is, what would you support? And I would support, you know, we've got to raise that limit to $12,000 to $15,000 because the average cost of living is $3,500 within this Northern Virginia environment. So you really need 4 months to be able to, you know, to recover from something for that rainy day. And, you know, $3,500 times 4 gives you that kind of money that you would need to be able to have that basis. And then the other thing is that the Social Security amounts that they do get, the payments that you do get, are not enough to recover or to cover the cost of living for a month. And these things go up faster than Congress can respond to increase. So, for example, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with the strike last week, right? Prices of food could go up really rapidly. Well, is Congress going to sit there and say, okay, let's increase the price of, let's increase the payments for Social Security to match the increase of the cost of the food items that we need to buy? So what you have to do is build a buffer in there, and a buffer would last, would have to be somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 to get these folks to be able to survive for a longer period of time. So I do support increasing the base amount, and then I also support increasing the payments to the folks so that they can live a life where they're living with dignity. We keep talking about dignity, but you got to get down to the dollars and cents of dignity, and this would be the minimum, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. And now David Kennedy weighing in here on Social Security.
Yep. Yes, I'm going to just say yes, yes, yes to what everyone else has shared. I have a good friend who's on disability. This guy, his name's Ricky. He is a go-getter. He does lots of landscaping jobs. He does work at our church. And he's one of those people who suffers with this cap at $2,000. It's really a perverse incentive. It kind of forces you to take your disability insurance and then any income you might make on the side through wages or through some other kind of mechanism, and it just forces you to spend money. Ricky must have a closet full of sneakers and Michael Jordans because he's got to spend it. And so to increase the cap to whether it's 10,000 or 12,000 makes absolute sense. So I'm on board with everyone else that we need to address the bipartisan Savings Penalty Elimination Act.
Thank you so much. And we'll turn the same question now over to Bentley Hensel.
So, thank you. Like my other candidates, I'm supportive of the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. It's a strong step forward, but one of the big things that I'm really happy that it does is that it includes a provision for adjusting for inflation, which Congress many times forgets that things change and you need to adjust for that without having to pass an entirely new bill. Some things that I'm not super excited about. I think we should include a mechanism that not only adjusts the limits, but updates the definitions of resources based on economic conditions. What you need to live changes. Internet was not a thing 20 years ago, and it is now. We shouldn't have to pass an entirely new bill every single time one of those things changes. Additionally, I think we should exclude things like retirement accounts and emergency savings so that people can plan for the future, and resources, I think, should incorporate the COLA, cost of living adjustment, so that people living in Northern Virginia, are helped a little bit more than people living in my hometown in Alexandria, Louisiana, with cost of living is much, much lower. And I think, and while, admirable, it's not as I said, an ARC bill that includes everything. Being a technologist, I think that overall applying for disability benefits is an absolute travesty in this country right now, and it needs a complete and total rebuild. And I think at least not mentioning that was something that was handled in it. And finally, I think we need to review about spousal resource limits and exempt cases and exempt assets used for long-term care or home and community-based healthcare services. But overall, again, it's a great start, and I think it's much, much better than we've had in many, many years.
Thank you so much. And now, Senator Subramaniam, we would love your thoughts on Savings Penalty Elimination Act.
They're going to have us last. Good question. They're rotating, is what they said.
And I've still got you on mute.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to join the chorus and agree with what folks have said. I do support it, and I think people don't realize that disabled people face poverty at twice the rate of people without disabilities, and we also see this hasn't been updated since I think 1989. And you think about what's going on, the cost of living for people generally is just going up and up. And so, this has to be fixed, and it should have been fixed a long time ago. And so I agree with a lot of what's been said, and I look forward to supporting that in Congress.
Thank you so much. And same question now over to you, Mike Clancy.
Thank you. No, I tell you, I've listened to these, these congressional forums over the past, number of terms, and the same question comes up every single time, and we have the same folks on these calls with the incumbents, and yet nothing seems to move or change. And I think it's really shocking that it's been 35 years or so, and there's been no adjustment in these levels. And I think that's cries out for a change to shift this congressional leadership from career politicians to a new wave of energy to come in and really drive to do good things for the American people. And that includes dealing with this issue. And, especially, as Derrick pointed out, families are struggling right now. We've seen 25 to 30% growth in the cost of living just in the last 3-4 years, and the issues. So this whole issue has even gotten more worse over recent years, and it needs to be adjusted. And so absolutely, it needs to be modernized for the current economy. Cost of living adjustments should be built in. And second, we need to deal with the marriage penalty. We should be pro-family, and we should not penalize families. We should not penalize someone for getting married by cutting the benefit by 25%, cutting the limit by 25%. So we need to eliminate that marriage penalty so that we can be pro-family and for the folks who are relying on this program. And I talked at a recent county fair with a couple, and the husband is disabled. He's in a wheelchair. He's an engineer. He would love to work more, but he's hamstrung by this current level of funding, current asset level requirement. So absolutely, it does impede people. It does create kind of a disincentive for people who have the skills and want to be fully, want to work and have the ability to do it. And yet this is a built-in disincentive. And so it needs to be remedied absolutely needs to be remedied, and it should be done 2 years from now when you're having the next session. This should be fixed. It absolutely should be fixed. Thanks.
That is certainly our hope. And Representative Connolly, over to you on this question. Still on mute. We'll give you a second there to toggle around.
Okay, we're unmuted. Thanks so much. Well, this is another example where everyone's saying, yeah, I favor it. So do I. I support HR 5408, the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act, which does several things. It finally rationally raises the asset level, although still, in my view, to inadequate levels, 11,000 and 17,000 respectively. But we gotta tie it to inflation, which the bill does, so that going forward, there's an automatic adjustment. So we're not doing this and waiting for 35 years. But there's part two to this. How do we pay for that improvement? And I am on record, and I support paying for Social Security across the board by raising the income threshold subject to withholding tax. Right now, it's limited to something like $168,000 a year. So if you make $1,168,000 a year, that extra $1 million is not taxed in terms of Social Security. That makes no sense at all. That's regressive, and we're leaving huge amounts of revenue that can keep Social Security solvent for another generation or two. So I not only favor fixing the Social Security asset limit, which to me is absurd and punitive, but I'm also willing to pay for it. And I'd like to hear other people explain whether they're willing to do that too, because I can tell you that in Congress, there are a whole bunch of people who take a no tax pledge, and they're not willing to vote to fund these programs. They say they support them, but when it comes to the budget and the appropriations and the tax policy that's required to backstop initiatives like this, they withhold their support. So I'm willing to do both.
Thanks for joining us. And Michael Van Meter, your thoughts here.
All right. Well, again, I get to, what am I going to say to everybody? Yes, 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 and yes. I guess the only different take I would have on this is raising taxes is one way. of doing this. But what I'm in favor of is really looking at the spending and looking at the demands that we have on these programs. Because I can tell you this, you know, I work in a hospital now, and just to put things in perspective, because you know this limit that we have is so low, and even if we raise it, it's still pretty low. Put this in perspective. 5 days in the unit that I work in, and we're not even close to being the most expensive unit you can visit in the hospital, is $10,000. That just 5 days in there. You're gonna blow through this money pretty quick. We have to do something about that. But why is this so expensive? There's a lot of reasons why it's so expensive, but a lot of it has to do with the demands that are placed on our system, the hospital system, community services, police, education, on and on and on. There's so many different issues that we could talk about. And a lot of this is because the hospital, the medical system, we have to provide services to anyone that comes in our door. We want to do that because we're humane and we want to help people. But we have more and more people that come here that aren't paying into the system, but yet are taking from the system, and it drives the cost for everyone up. And so we have to take a really hard look at that. You know, when I'm in Congress, you know, something that you have to understand with me is that we're going to take a good hard look at these systems and see where we can save money, okay? Because taxing our citizens, particularly in Northern Virginia, which is really difficult, a difficult place financially to live. And if you're a young person, it's unlikely that you're going to purchase a home up here in Northern Virginia. We have to find ways to get control on our inflation. We have to find ways to reduce the demands on our all of our community systems and bring that down. But the answer to the question is yes, I would support increasing that limit because we have to. It's way overdue. 35 years is way overdue. It doesn't keep pace with inflation, but we need to take a good hard look at those systems themselves. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Eugene Vinman, last but not least, we're wrapping back around to you here.
Well, thank you for that question. And I guess it sounds like we have unanimous agreement, at least on this particular question, that we need to update the law. So in Congress, I proudly support the SSI, Savings Penalty Elimination Act. This legislation is paramount in addressing one of the biggest financial issues impacting individuals with disabilities and allowing them to achieve financial independence. Individuals and families with a family member with a disability need to be able to save money, both ensuring that they can continue to receive SSI benefits while also allowing savings over the poverty line. No family should face financial hardship because of outdated rules that make it impossible for someone to build adequate savings. And finally, I would say we should also eliminate the marriage penalty in the current limit. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we're hitting the 7 o'clock hour, we'll have a check-in with Connor.
Okay, just a friendly reminder, please only talk about yourself and your platform and do not talk about others whatsoever. So thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to another topic. People with disabilities, aging in place, our veterans, brain injury survivors, people with developmental disabilities, huge parts of our population rely on home and community-based services for everyday things. Employment supports that's been mentioned so heavily here, getting around our community, and even things like bathing and dressing. But we know there's not enough money in our home and community-based services program to support people. In fact, 800,000 people with disabilities across the country have already applied for programs like this and are waiting on very long waiting lists, which means family caregivers are burning out. And sometimes we have people experiencing homelessness. Like I got a call from a gentleman today. How would you suggest Congress address this waiting list crisis that touches Virginia, where there's a waiting list of 16,000, but also nationwide? And first up, Representative Byer.
Thank you very much. This is a really difficult problem that's been around for a long time. Let me just personal examples. My sister, Kathy, whom I mentioned, was on a waiting list for housing with her intellectual disability for years and years. When she finally did get housing, it gobbled up almost all the savings that she had made and that we had put into her over the years. My son, whom I mentioned also, the only housing we can find that's community-based services is extraordinarily expensive. You know, think $20,000 a month. It's a very challenging issue, and it feeds right back to the fact that we're depending on which statistics you're using, 3 to 6 million homes short in America. We're at least 150,000 housing units short here in the DMV. I'm the lead co-sponsor of the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Act, which we passed in the House this year, but one Republican senator sadly killed it in the Senate. We hope to revisit it in the first quarter of 2025, but it would create 200,000 new homes in the next couple of years. Ultimately, we need to do the full thing because we need to be building 1 million plus homes a year. I am proud that my presidential candidate is committed to 3 million homes over the next 4 years. And I think that's exactly what we're going to have to do in order to be able to provide these services. As Lieutenant Governor, I think one of the proudest things that came out of my commission on Virginians with disabilities was the creation of disability service boards, analogous to the community service boards we have in almost every jurisdiction. And a subset of that was, for the first time in Virginia, funding personal assistance. Because there's so many people with multiple disabilities just need that extra bit of help. Some a little bit of help, some an awful lot of help. But the money for the personal assistance didn't show up at all until we got it into the Virginia budget. I go back to what Congressman Connolly said very wisely, though, is we're looking at a $35 trillion deficit right now on the way to $50 trillion in the next couple of years. We have to be brave enough to pay for the things that we want to spend. Now, let's be face it, that's one of the reasons they haven't happened, is because a number of my colleagues, I won't pick on anybody, are absolutely against any kind of tax increase, but they're also unwilling to cut any benefits. And so that leaves you in a place where nothing changes. We want to see change, but we also want to make sure that we're paying for it, because that's the responsible thing for any leader to do.
Thank you so much. And Jerry Torres, your thoughts on making sure we've got enough home and community-based services for all folks with disabilities who need them?
Yeah, I haven't talked about my family. I have 2 uncles that are actually disabled, and they've been disabled for most of their adult lives, and so we take care of them as a family. And I'm, the primary provider to them to make sure that they get everything they need to survive, because they would be one of those 800,000 people around the country, not here in Virginia, because they're not here in Virginia. So us as a family stood up, and I've looked high and low for opportunities where, or resources to help me care for them. So if you can imagine what you have to do to care for somebody who can't take care of themselves, you have 24-hour support. And those are certified nursing assistants, for example, and they don't make much money. And I can't afford to pay them the kind of money they probably deserve. And there's no government organization or funding out there to help pay for these things. So getting back, and I agree with Don Byer, we have to increase the funding for this kind of stuff. There should not, I'll just say this. If I were in a position of leadership, there would not be 800,000, there wouldn't be 15,000 waiting. All of them would have access to the funds to be able to get into the program, so that they could, clean themselves, so that they can eat reliably, so that they can have opportunities for employment. I mean, it's just a matter of going from, yeah, I think we should do this, to actually getting it done. I mean, our job in this country as adults is to pay taxes specifically to support and protect those who cannot support or protect themselves. And I listened to the folks talking about, I'm in this committee and I'm proud of what I've done in the past, but it really is a very simple thing. The numbers are probably finite. You have 800,000 plus 15,000. There's probably a number in there that pushes people into the support that they need, and it continues to support them. And every American citizen would support that. There's not a Democrat or Republican that would not support something like that. It's just a matter of getting to the doing and getting away from the talking. Thank you.
All right. And David Kennedy, your thoughts here on home and community-based services?
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Well, first, I think it's all, again, very personal, because I think all of us see this some point in our life. 3 situations jump at me. First, my mom, who was a trained nurse, had to take care of my dad as he started suffering dementia. And as great a nurse as my mom was, she finally couldn't do it anymore. And that's when we had to start looking for services actually through a nursing home for my dad. And thank God my dad had a long-term, had invested in a long-term care health policy. Otherwise, I don't know how he would have paid for that, because where he was, there was only one or two facilities that accepted Medicaid. So he was actually able to get into a facility that accepted the long-term care policy. So we have to, we have to have the ability, and this is for our seniors and those who are elderly, we have to have a robust system of nursing homes that are compassionate and can care for those when our families can't do it anymore. In a second scenario, my mother-in-law, who's struggling but is still a horse and is able to do a lot on her own, she's actually in Illinois, and they have a Medicaid waiver there where my son is able to actually provide some of the services she needs to get around to doctor's appointments and grocery shopping, and he's reimbursed under this program. So that's a we need to have those Medicaid waivers in place to allow for that flexibility. And then the third thing, or get away. The third thing we got to pay attention to is home healthcare workers, who I believe in here in Virginia, average wage is about $15 an hour. That's not a living wage here in Northern Virginia. And we have to be able to have a robust, it's about supply and demand. I mean, we have the demand for home care services is here, and the supply of those providing is here, just because we just don't have enough workers in there. And a lot of times I've met some of them from Africa and other foreign countries who end up taking these jobs. It's just not a job. It's not a job that pays a living wage. And there's such a carousel of a friend of mine who's in Arlington who has had a carousel of these home health care workers. So we have to be able to pay these people a living wage.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Hensel, on to you.
There we go. In my opinion, the home and community-based health services, it's not just about funding. We've got, like others have said, we've got over 800,000 people across the country, 15,000 in Virginia, that are waiting for services. So you could fund it with all of the money in the world. If they can't access it, for all intents and purposes, it doesn't exist. So we need to, in my opinion, reform how the system is actually orchestrated. It's broken, caregivers are underpaid, burning out, and families are left to fill in the gaps. I think we need a, like I said, complete overhaul. First thing I think that jumps to mind is we should use technology like FHIR, FHIR. It's fast healthcare interoperability resources, where deals with if you want to deal with Medicare, you have to use that data system, and that would drastically improve communication between service providers and caregivers. This is not a total solution, but it would help get people off of waiting lists faster and access the services they need without complete unnecessary delays. Secondly, we need to incentivize caregivers to actually provide care. A child care and adult care tax credit or stipend system should compensate caregivers with higher training and certifications, and encouraging them to take on not just more clients, but also adults and children who have higher needs. And we need to do that because, again, how many parents out there cannot find, they may have the benefits, but actually cannot find someone to take the benefits. So overall, I think a complete system reform is needed before we can actually begin addressing the underlying issue. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Senator Subramaniam, your question, your chance here.
Yes, I agree with a lot of what people said before. I do want to make sure we get rid of the waiting list and that we can fund these programs. Right now, what's kind of frustrating is that because there hasn't been enough federal action, it really depends on the state you're in, what kind of services and care you have. And so we have to change that. And I know I think it was Senator Casey and Senator Dingell that had a bill to basically make home and community-based services a mandatory Medicaid benefit. And I know that got held up in the Senate, but we have to keep trying. We have to keep making sure. And what'll happen if we are able to pass laws like that is then family members who often have to quit their job or quit the business that they started to take care of their relative, they're going to be able to pursue those economic opportunities themselves, and it'll be great for the economy as well. So this is actually a really good investment and one that we need to make. And so yes, it'll cost some money to be able to do this, but we'll get that money back in the long run because this is a lot to take on if you're a family member. My wife's family had to experience this, and it's just a lot. And so I think I'd support that bill, and I want to make sure that we address this in a meaningful way and pass in the House and Senate and get signed into law.
Thank you. And Mike Clancy, your thought on these home and community-based services waiting lists?
Yes, thank you. So this is this is a federal and state issue, and it's sort of a 50-50 proposition as to address this issue in a robust way and to address it effectively. And we've seen in the case of Virginia that Governor Youngkin took action on these wait lists. I mean, it hasn't been perfectly solved, but he dedicated resources and focused on the wait list issue and to drive a resolution to the wait list and to give people the services they need. And I think that's what you need. We need the local government. I don't think this is a situation where the federal government tries to go into all these 50 states and all these cities and towns and all these communities and hospitals and tries to run all things, because that just creates massive bureaucracy. It's best done at the local level. It's best done the states working at the local level, and that's where, as Governor Youngkin has shown, that's how it's most effective and how most successful. I mean, he brought sort of a businessman's problem-solving approach to this and tackled this problem and has made great strides. And in terms of funding, the Medicaid program needs to be addressed. The Medicaid funding piece of this needs to be addressed to expand it, because that is the federal portion of the money, which is grants to the states. And that's where we would address the issue from a federal level. But in terms of actual implementation, that's more robust work at the state level.
Thank you. And Representative Connolly, the home and community-based services waiting lists.
Thank you. Am I on?
Yep, but as our interpreters moved around, so did our spotlights. There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Well, two things right away. We should pass the Better Care, Better Jobs Act that increases the federal Medicaid match for HCBS. That we could do, I hope, with dispatch. Secondly, we need to expand, not contract, the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant Program, because that is a source of funds to actually acquire properties for group homes. So if you want to find a mechanism for expanding capacity in group homes, CDBG, federal funding, not local funding, and by the way, not state of Virginia funding, that's federal funding. And, again, when President Trump was in the White House, he tried to eliminate CDBG funding entirely. We were able, fortunately, to stop that, but Project 2025, created by a very conservative think tank, would revisit that issue and try to eliminate CDBG. That would be catastrophic for the disability community, and it would be catastrophic for our local governments that rely on CDBG funding for a whole continuum of human services, including especially for intellectually disabled and developmentally disabled individuals. So those two things have to happen from my point of view. But again, I want to stress, you're not going to cut spending your way out of this. We need new resources, and we need to be willing to pay for them. We're not going to find enough savings in discretionary spending to keep all of the promises all of us are making tonight. So we need to be honest with all of you that if we support these things, we need to be willing to vote for them. We need to be willing to vote for the appropriations that fund them, and we need to vote for the revenue that will support those appropriations in a long-term sustainable way.
Thank you. And Michael Van Meter, home and community-based services waiting lists.
Yeah, thanks. Well, again, most of these issues were covered at this point, but I want to address it from a different tact. And again, I think I'm the only person on this panel tonight that actually works in this field currently. And I'll tell you, it's been a real eye opener for me being inside this industry. You know, there's a lot of talk about building facilities and spending money. I mean, that's important. You have to have facilities to go to, of course.
We just say,
But if you don't have people to staff these facilities, it's a moot point. You can build a building, but you're not going to have the counselors. You're not going to have the staff. You're not going to have these people. Let me just kind of give you just a little insight into this. It's very expensive to become trained to become a counselor, an addiction counselor, a mental health counselor, or to even become licensed and certified to work in any facility in the state of Virginia or anywhere around the country for that matter. Very expensive. And we're asking people to go into these jobs, spend a lot of money to become certified just to get paid a wage that you can't live on once you get to the other side of all that training. And we're asking them to do the Lord's work. Imagine, if you will, that you're in a job where every single person you deal with that comes into your office is having the worst day of their life. That's every person that comes into proximity with you, them and their families. Somebody mentioned earlier tonight burnout. I can tell you, your average shift at the hospital is 10 to 12 hours. It is grueling work. I'm only able to do what I'm doing, the work that I'm doing right now, because I'm retired and I have other income, and I'm doing this work because it's a life calling. But if I was coming right out of college, this would be very, very difficult work to do. To put it in perspective, to become an entry-level certified therapist where I work, it took more time for me to do that than it took for me to become a combat-rated helicopter pilot in the United States Navy. Let that sink in for a minute. It's a grueling process. It's a difficult process. And consequently, we are not getting Americans, we are not getting people that are devoting themselves to this field. Someone mentioned people that are foreign born that come here. The facility that I work in, the vast majority of people that work in the facility are actually not from the United States. We have to staff these facilities, so we go overseas and bring people in. We have great doctors, nurses, healthcare providers, and et cetera. But most of them are not people that were born and grew up here in the United States. And I want to look at that, and I want to incentivize people to go into a field that is really one of the most honorable fields that you can go into, working with the people that have substance abuse issues, mental health issues, they're differently abled. I mean, these are honorable service positions that we should be encouraging young people to go into. And we have to look at that. Because once again, you can spend all of the money that you want, build all the facilities you want. If you don't have people working there, it's a moot point. Thank you.
Thank you. And next to last on this question, Eugene Vinman, your thoughts on these waiting lists?
So a lot has been said on the topic, and I agree with a lot of it. So Congress and local governments need to adequately fund a nationwide infrastructure to properly address service gaps and ensure that people with disabilities get the services they need and their families aren't strained by trying to fill those gaps themselves. If elected, I'd work with other members of Congress to ensure that respective agencies of jurisdiction receive the vital funding that they need to regularly operate HCBS programs while also developing an apparatus so that they can avoid exacerbating these issues in the future.
Thank you. And last but not least here, Derrick Anderson, home and community-based services waiting lists.
Yeah, thanks again, Lucy. Look, we need to look at increasing funding for home and community-based services by focusing on smarter allocation of federal resources. And, we can prioritize disability support programs by ensuring that these programs directly benefiting people with disabilities and their families receive the necessary funding. I also think it's important to review the existing programs that are in place. We need to assess the current programs to make sure that they're efficient, effective, and the funding supports those who need it the most. I think it's also important that we empower states and give states like Virginia more flexibility in administering Medicaid reducing federal red tape, and enabling innovative, localized solutions. I'm a big proponent of making sure we have a strong partnership with our public and private entities, working with private and nonprofit sectors to provide alternative solutions, including telehealth and tech-based support, especially in rural areas with limited resources. Like my district has, several counties that are very rural and have limited access to internet. And then lastly, implementing tax credits to support family caregivers who play a critical role in the home and community-based care. I have a family member who does that, and she provides a valuable asset to our family. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we'll give folks a chance to quickly wrap things up tonight. And if there's any topic that we've gotten a lot of questions about that you wanted to speak to, feel free to briefly mention that in your closing remarks, aiming for a minute or so per person. So Jerry Torres, you're up first with any kind of final thoughts on the evening.
Sure. Thank you so much. All of these are situations that are preventable. The people that need the help can't get the help if we ourselves unite to make sure that our most vulnerable get the help and get the resources they need. And the thing is everybody has agreed on 90% of what we talked about tonight, and they probably would have agreed on it, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 administrations ago. It's the doing that is the difference, and the problem is that as we're talking about it, there are people literally on the streets looking for some assistance to get off the streets and get into a situation where they can live with dignity, get employment, have home and shelter, all the things that we all have right now. And that's the thing that really caused me to run for Congress, is that we have so many smart people and they know what the right answers are, but they can't get to the implementation of a solution that actually helps the people that need it most. And I've been taking my own resources to do it because the government is leaving these big gaps. And I've been doing this for years, and I've been blessed because I've just been lucky in my life to have been successful in business, and I can afford it. But a lot of people can't. That next subject you were talking about, which with the home health care, people making $15 an hour, that's real. That is real. And that's something that our government should invest in. We should invest in educating people to be able to do things like home health care. But we don't really have a good handle on that from a federal perspective. That's why, as some of the folks have said, we're getting so many immigrants coming in and taking those jobs that would normally pay a little bit better with the right certifications, the right education, the right government support. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think we all pretty much agree that we need to do something for the people that need it the most. Thank you again for having me.
Goodness, I hope we all agree there. So, Dave Kennedy, your closing thoughts tonight.
Well, again, thank you, Lucy and Sharon and Connor. You all have been awesome tonight. This is democracy. This is how we advance democracy. We all come together, we talk, we look at solutions. This kind of discourse is what it should look like. And I wish whoever's elected, I hope you all take it to the House and remember tonight, because this is how we should be communicating. I want to call out one other issue that we didn't get to tonight. Actually, this revolves around my church ministry. I work with a lot of folks who wander the streets, severe mental illness, and I look at that as the most vulnerable. And how we reach out to those folks, it's not easy, because we say they don't want help. It's not that they don't want help. It's just when they're in that severe place of mental illness, I think that I think it talks to what we said earlier. We got to value those workers, those people who have a heart for this kind of work, who are willing to go out into the streets and meet with those people who are the most vulnerable. And we need to to support those people with a living wage, because these are the hardest people to work with. And I also want to just lift up our veterans again, because my son is a veteran. The hardest thing he's had to do is reconnect to civilian life. And he has his buddies that are one in New Orleans, one out in Arizona. He doesn't get to see him every day. He doesn't, and those stories that they experienced are stories that I don't know about. Some of you guys who served probably know those stories more than I, but we need to have, again, the most vulnerable. And I think sometimes our veterans who come back fall into that bucket of the most vulnerable. We need to be a compassionate society. We need to look out for those who, and it's not charity like ARC and autism societies, like you say, it's not charity, it's rights. And it's looking out for those folks and lifting those folks, making sure those resources are available. And thanks everyone tonight. It's been great. I appreciate you giving me a chance to participate.
We were glad to have you with us. And Bentley Hensel, your final thoughts tonight.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me here tonight and the issues we've discussed, Social Security and home-based health services. It really makes one thing clear. I think the federal government really needs to step up. We've left these critical decisions to state governments, and they have absolutely failed us at every single turn. I personally don't think we should trust legislators in, for example, Texas, who don't believe abortion is healthcare, or the same government and legislators who've absolutely wrecked the American education system to handle these essential issues. I think, again, it's time for the federal government to step up. The whole system is broken, and we need to reform how it's managed and implemented, because even if we throw more funding at it, we're still going to have 15,000 people here in Virginia that can't get services. We need to ensure that the services, everyone can access them, and it doesn't matter where they live, everyone can access the services they need to succeed in this country. For me, again, I'm really interested in getting things done and actual solutions to fix these incredibly broken systems. I believe it's about building a future where we have a system that actually works, and we deserve a government that's efficient, transparent, and focused on the people it's supposed to serve. I believe in that, and I believe in the real action, and I'm hoping November I can begin implementing these solutions. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. And Senator Subramaniam, your closing thoughts tonight.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this evening, and thank you for the questions. And I think a couple of things we didn't address was childcare for families with children with disabilities, as well as employment barriers. I know in Virginia now we're telling folks that if they employ someone with disabilities, they have to be paid the minimum wage, and I think that's the right policy. Also, working with law enforcement on how to handle situations involving people with disabilities too. And so there's a lot to address, but I think the saying goes, nothing about us without us. And I look forward to working with you all to implement good legislation and being your champion in Congress. And so thank you again for having me. And as a state senator, I've worked with you all, and I look forward to working with you all in Congress.
Thanks so much for joining us. And Mike Clancy.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for everyone who's been watching this today, and thank you, Art, for hosting this thing. My focus in this area has been the children, and I early on I became very active in helping to promote job training programs for young adults with Down syndrome, and we were able to get a program in place that included job training, and that ultimately culminated in a good paying job for that young adult once they work their way through the job training program. And that's empowerment, and that helps them have independence and have pride in the work that they're doing. Likewise, in the school system, we've had a lot of issues in the school system, and we've had one of the issues we didn't touch on is the way the students are treated, and wanting to make sure we protect the children from undue seclusion and undue restraints. Which are overdone, and we need to make sure there's proper training for the teachers who are working with these students and to protect these children in the school environment. And, we need to make sure that there's a robust educational program and that the funding is there at the, at the school levels to make sure that the students are getting the resources they need and the teachers are getting the resources they need to meet the needs of disabled students, whether it's autism or some other learning disability. And those are sort of primary, have always been primary focus for me are the children and advocating for them at the school board on those issues. And I'll take that same energy and that same commitment to the United States Congress to advocate for our children, to advocate for parents who are caring for children, to make sure that they have the resources, the commitment, and the legal structure to support them. And, that includes job access. There's one of your questions had to do with discrimination in the job environment. Well, there is the ADA is designed to protect that, and we need to ensure that there's proper enforcement so that folks with disabilities have access to jobs, they have access to equal pay, and then we have strong enforcement of those laws to protect them. And so, in closing, I'm going to Congress to serve you all, to work for you, to fight for your children, to fight for your future, to restore America. And I'd be deeply honored to have your vote and look forward to serving you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Representative Connolly, your final thoughts tonight.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And again, thanks to everyone for sponsoring tonight and to everybody who participated. I think it was enlightening. I wish we had more time and could have covered more territory. You asked, what did we kind of miss? I think two important ones. One is childcare, which Stu has just mentioned. The other is incarceration. 40% of those who are incarcerated in America enter prison with a disability. 40%. Prisons aren't necessarily well equipped to deal with that. Two other points I'd like to make. One is that I think key to everything we're talking about is staffing. After COVID, recruiting and retaining staff at lower wage jobs that nonetheless require a lot out of people is very difficult, much more difficult than it was pre-COVID. People have lots more opportunities because unemployment is so low. And the national unemployment rate is 4.1%. Here in Fairfax County and most of Northern Virginia, it's more like 2%. That means jobs are plenty, and we're competing in a very vigorous employment environment, both federal employment, local, state employment, and private sector employment. So very difficult to recruit somebody and retain them at the wage scale we're looking at. So sooner or later, it seems to me that the federal government has got to come up with a comprehensive plan to guarantee higher wages for these kinds of jobs if we're going to recruit and retain people who are going to make this their living. And many people would like to, they can't afford to. Point number two, somebody made a remark about immigrants stealing jobs. Actually, it's the opposite. We need a comprehensive immigration reform program to ensure that we have a steady stream of workers in America. And those workers are going to largely come from other places. I know of one example, for example, the Washington Post highlighted, where a group of trained nurses and doctors and technicians and orderlies in the Philippines were signed up, had been recruited by a hospital in Wyoming to come to the United States legally and to take over a lot of positions from people who were just exhausted from COVID and were ready to carry on with their lives somewhere else. Great deal. Good for the community in Wyoming, good for that hospital, keeping it open and fully staffed, and good for Filipinos who want to, have a new future in America. And it's our immigration system that prevents that. So the more we rail against legal immigration or any immigration, the more I think we discourage workers who can help fill many of the positions we're worried about here. They can either be trained or come here as already trained, like the example of the workers in the Philippines, and help us address the worker shortage that we've got to fix while we're also building new facilities that will have to be staffed to eat into that waiting list and make sure everybody is empowered and has opportunity. Ultimately, this discussion tonight is about two things: empowerment and personal autonomy. And it seems to me there's a legitimate role for the government to play in making both of those things possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Michael Van Meter, your final thoughts tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for hosting the forum. And I just kind of address one thing right off the bat as we close out. Yeah, the comment was not foreign workers stealing jobs. It was the need for foreign workers to come here because we can't get Americans to do the job. And Representative Connolly talked about the wages, and that was the point. The point was we are not paying people that are in a very, very difficult job. How do I know that? Because I do that job right now. The pay has to be commensurate with the work and making it worthwhile to go through what you have to do to get the degree and the license. And that's very, very important. So it has nothing to do with immigrants stealing jobs. We have great immigrants that come here to do the job because we wouldn't have anybody doing the job if that was the case. And there are great people that are there. Now, David Kennedy on the call here mentioned something. And I want to thank David for the work that he's doing with the homeless. And that is something that we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about tonight, but Dave mentioned that. And I really appreciate that because it's something that's near and dear to my heart, especially not just that we have homeless, but many of the homeless are veterans. And we should not have any veteran living on the street, number one. But many of the homeless that we have on the streets that you see out here on the streets of both DC and in our county, as a matter of fact, are people that have unaddressed severe mental health issues that are going on that are not addressed. I know they're there. How do I know? Because many of those individuals come into our facility because the shelters that they're in and the community programs that they will live in are oftentimes not sanitary. They're dangerous. There's drugs in some of these facilities. The staffing is not adequate. The training for the staff that's there is not adequate. The pay is not adequate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what a lot of individuals do, because the hospital is a safer, cleaner place, oftentimes we have many, many people that come into our facility that actually go out and will drink or use drugs, come to the emergency room, and then be sent up to our unit, and they'll buy themselves anywhere from 3 to 5 days because it's safer for them to do that, to live in a facility that we have here in the county. And I feel for those individuals. I understand what they're doing, but that's a tremendous burden, financial burden on the rest of us and for the community and for the cost of healthcare. And on one hand, they're doing that because they want to be safe and secure. But on the other hand, that's not a proper use of the resources that we have in this particular unit. But why are they doing that? Because there's a lack of the number of facilities and safety and security in these facilities. And it's something that again, a unique experience that I bring to the table in Congress, where I can look at that and work with our community leaders, work with the hospitals, work with the people, with religious organizations like David talked about that, because that's something he does through a ministry that he works with. And we don't really talk about that enough, is how can we partner with the communities and the faith community, but not just the faith-based communities, but them as well, and really get community leaders to work and see if we can't find ways to make access to mental health, addiction, issues for people that are differently abled, those types of things, and bring the community in and see what we can all do to help this. Okay, I'm going to tell you, it's not an easy thing to do. Again, I work in this industry. It is enormously complicated on a lot of different levels. And that is why someone mentioned on this call tonight, if you are looking at a representative that has been in office for years, maybe decades even, and these things have not been done, but they come onto a call and they talk about how these things need to be done, then the question is, why haven't you done it before? And so as we move into November 5th, ask yourself that question. Has this individual done the very things that they're talking about? And if not, maybe give someone else a chance. Give someone else a chance. Being in the House of Representatives should not be a career, and it will not be a career for me. It is not. I've had my career. I'm here to serve the American people, and that's what we're going to do. Great ideas on the call tonight. I think most of us agree on what needs to be done. It's maybe just differences in how it will be done. But I look forward to doing it, and I look forward to serving all of you in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. And final thoughts now from Eugene Vindman.
Yeah, so thank you, Art, for the opportunity to address these important topics. There is frankly a lot of agreement on these topics, but what we need is independent leaders that are willing to make decisions that may be unpopular with their party. I've always been an independent leader, and I'd be proud to represent this district with common sense solutions to ensure that we have SSI reform, HCBS, trained caregivers that earn a living wage, allow differently abled individuals to participate in the process by having a seat at the table, an education environment that would ban the practice of seclusion and restraint, like Don's proposal, address the childcare crisis that has personally affected my family, where my wife and I of 26 years have been dual professionals for basically our kids' entire lives. My family is my motivation. Adequate childcare is an issue that ensures that our economy is in a position to thrive. This is also a major issue in reining in costs and allowing families in my district to live the American dream. Finally, we need to ensure that we have a society that serves all of our citizens with compassion, and that's what I'm committed to. I also want to thank the panelists, frankly, for the respectful dialogue and for the amount of consensus on these topics. I hope this carries over to the next Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, and cheers to good attitudes carrying over to the next Congress. And Derrick Anderson, your thoughts here.
Yeah, and thanks again, Lucy, for hosting this. To ARC, to Sharon and Connor, as always, a pleasure. I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. We talked about a variety of topics here. One topics you heard a few of the individuals talk about on here, but I want to emphasize it. It was the veteran community. A lot of our veterans have gone overseas, whether it be Iraq, Afghanistan, or throughout the Middle East for that matter. They went in to serve our country. They went there on their own accord to serve our country. And then some of them came back with scars, and not always scars on the outside, they were the scars on the inside. And when we do see our our veteran community homeless, it really does hurt me inside desperately, especially considering I've had several former soldiers and/or friends of mine that I went to college with that ended up serving overseas that ultimately took their life. So, this is a serious issue. Mental health is a serious issue. It needs to be taken seriously. And to ensure our veterans who have spent 20 plus years of war, whether it be in Iraq or Afghanistan, are getting the resources that they need. And again, I appreciate you all having me tonight. I look forward to these type of collegial conversations in the future with my colleagues up in the House. And it'd be an honor to represent the 7th Congressional District where I grew up, the place that's my home, and represent the people that raised me. So thank you all again.
Kind. Thanks so much for joining us. And the final closing word to Representative Byer.
Thanks for saving the best for last, Lucy. You're very kind. Hey, and I want to thank Lucy and Connor and Sharon. Thanks so much for putting all this together. Yeah, I just want to tell you how encouraged I am by the conversation tonight. I've learned an awful lot about the other people that are running for office, and usually very good things. All the community service, the great love, compassion, and activity that you show, and I'm really impressed. I also have heard an awful lot of frustration tonight about why don't those damn career politicians just do these things? Let me hint to those who have not yet been in elective office. This stuff is really hard. Jerry and I, and I think Suhas now in his legislative day, I mean, most weeks are at least 60 hours and often 80 hours of work. And not just within our own party. I keep a running list of my 100 best friends, Republican friends in the US Congress, because to get things done, you've got to work across party lines. Just working across party lines isn't enough. Every year we put 400 bills that the House has passed on the Republican desks that never, in the House Senate desks rather, that never get taken up because you have to get 60 votes over there for almost anything. The filibuster makes this very, very difficult. We talked about my Keep All Students Safe Act. I've been working on it for 10 years, 106 co-sponsors. It's really important. The GAO keeps doing reports of the kids that are killed with seclusion restraints. Some of my Republican friends say, well, let's just leave it up to the states. But there are 22 states that have no rules whatsoever. Why can't we get it passed? We're going to get it passed. But you have to have it in one of those rare conditions where the House, the Senate, the president are all sort of on the same team. and moving in that direction. I think if the Republicans in the House were like the Republicans on the call tonight, we could actually get a lot done. But let's face it, they're not. And so we're just going to keep pushing forward. This is a job that requires not just enormous effort, but also a lot of patience and a willingness not to just walk away because I can't get things done. I don't know any career politicians on this thing tonight. I had a long career in business. Jerry Conley had a long career in government and the private sector. There are relatively few people that go up there and say, this is my livelihood. There are those of us who are going up there to do the best we possibly can in the short period of time that we can. And I thank you all for joining in this fray. It's what makes democracy strong. And I'm going to continue, like I introduced the Nurse Visa Act recently, last couple of weeks, to just open the doors to those nurses from other countries to overcome the nurse shortage that we have. But when you figure that right now we have just the local Arlington office has a 1 million asylum backlog, and they do 1 interview a day, and we don't have the resource to increase it. We're all going to have to work together to fix what is so often a broken system. And it's not a broken system because there are people there who don't care and aren't working hard. It's a broken system because people are so reluctant to change it. Anyway, thank you for being part of this, and I hope you all have a good evening.
I wanted to give a huge thank you to the candidates who joined us, them and their team members on their campaign staff who worked so hard with us to prepare this evening, our ASL interpreters, our partners for tonight. And I can't think of someone to give better closing words than Connor Cummings. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Miss Lucy. For the panel, thank you all for joining us. I heard different approaches and different opinions. I heard that you all care. Please always include us. Give us a seat at the table. Nothing about us without us. For you watching, the candidates answer questions and share some of their platforms. This is your chance now to vote your choice. Vote early or vote on election day like me. Bring family members and friends. Just vote. Please and thank you.
Please and thank you.
Connor.
Vote. Thanks all for being here. Have a great night.